Hey guys, this will be video 8 for the how to design build a custom guitar. Sometimes using Stuart McDonald templates, but not recently because we're getting very close to finishing this guitar. Uh, I think in the last video where I left off, I had not even glued the fretboard down. Yeah, that's correct. So the fretboard not only has been glued down and completely leveled and radiused and everything to 12-inch radius, but the mother of pearl is in, everything's leveled, even the frets are in, and the frets are perfectly leveled, but not polished yet. Typically, I don't polish the frets until pretty much the last thing because I'm at a point now to where I actually did string it up just in rough form, and it sounded really good, but just to get a feel for the leveling and everything. But for the most part, when you're putting this together, this is when you're really working with not only your straight edge here, but you're working with what's called a fret rocker. And I'm not going to go into it in this video because I've got everything covered up. But basically, up here in the short frets, you're working with the short flat, and then as you progressively move down, then you move to the longer, and you're only checking 3 frets at one time, and you're looking for the high frets. But don't let it deceive you because sometimes you think you have a high fret, but you might actually have a fret that is low. So if you found what you thought was a high fret, skip a fret and check that and make certain that it's not also rocking as well, because if you had 2 frets rocking right here, it's a very strong possibility that this fret in between them is low. So that's called a fret rocker. Most of you guys know what that is, but that is an instrumental tool in doing your fret work. And the good sign, a sign of a really good build, or someone that knows what they're doing, is you can hammer all your frets in, and pretty much you don't even have any leveling. Meaning you don't even have any frets that are out of level, because if you did a really nice job on your fretboard, not only is it radius properly, but it's also perfectly straight. Well, once your frets go in, if you don't overhammer them, then they will end up stopping at exactly the location that the fret actually stops, and then whatever the thickness of that fret is, it will carry that level to the top surface of the frets. So frets are fretwork is, it's not that fretwork is difficult. I think the main thing about fretwork is overcoming the fear of screwing up your job. But I say that to say this: uh, do some practicing if you are going to attempt to do your fretwork, or maybe get with a local guitar shop and see if they'll let you come in one day while they're doing a fret job and hang out with them. Maybe clean the shop or sweep the floor or something, just to learn how to do your own frets, because it really is very rewarding. But the guitar, I'll do a bit of a flyby, is it's ready for all the final clear coat work. James and I started talking about this guitar, and he wants a fairly glossy guitar, and I'm going to do the best I can to get it just like supermodel gloss. But I've never been the type builder that cares much for glossy guitars. But obviously, it's not my guitar; it is his. So I'm going to do the best I can to get a real nice heavy black base coat. Uh, Not heavy, but well covered. And then so that once I start shooting my clear, I've got something to work from. And black is definitely very difficult to work with, to say the least. And it just hit me that this is the first guitar that I've built in a very long time that is all black. Typically, like, I'll do a black body and then a mahogany neck or something like that. But it really requires that you slow down and really check what it is you're doing. But you've already seen this. This is just the rough base work, but I have sprayed a few more black coats. Well, now I think I've sprayed 2 more coats on the body, but I've probably sprayed upwards of 4 to 5 coats in the neck joint tenon area to make certain that there was no reveal for the joinery and stuff. And I apologize if it's poor camera work. It's just hard to do these videos and make certain that you keep everything in check. That should be really good right there. And then on the front, let me get this off the table. That way I won't scratch it. But as far as the front goes, you might see a little bit of orange peel there. It doesn't really matter at this point because I'm about to show you how to go about sanding this. and or how not to sand. And I'm fairly aggressive. This is a 220 grit, but I make certain that I don't let the paper get anywhere near the outside edge when I'm doing my sanding. When I am sanding, I'm making certain. When I am sanding, let's see if that's in the camera. I'm making certain that if I'm going to sand this area, I'm going to have the paper kind of rolled up like this, and I'm going to work in that quadrant over there, and then I'm going to flip the guitar around, and then I'm going to work the paper in this quadrant over here, and never allowing this paper to go off the edge, because I'm going to come back with my steel wool at the after the initial sand work, and I'm going to blend the flats into the round over. And I got to be really careful because I'm almost out of black lacquer. I am actually out of uh, lacquer from my past stock, but I went over to Birmingham and picked up some additional lacquer, and I ended up just getting one aerosol spray can. And it's and I'll show it in a minute. Let's see. I've got it on my warming station. Let me make sure the guitar doesn't fall. I've got it on my warming station, and this is what I'm going to be using to do the final clear coat. This is stringed instrument lacquer, M113-1406-1406. This used to be a product called Baleen's, but Mohawk bought them out. This is an exceptional product, and it's about $20. A little over $20 for an aerosol can. But I've got it in a warming station, and it's just, when I say warm, it's warm. It's not hot at all. You don't want it to get hot, but when it's warm, it sprays so much better. So after I flip off the camera, I'm going to be sanding this. I'm not about to attempt to sand this on camera because I don't want to risk rolling over any edges or anything, because there are a lot of really, uh, you know, there's a lot of areas that you'll screw up, especially since this is a black face on a black neck going into a black body. Everything about it is there are no break points. And I think, yeah, it covered. I was sanding a little while ago, and I just kissed that one corner just a little bit with the 220, and immediately it exposed the raw body wood. And the reason I say that, not to complain, but that's a very good thing, because the whole idea of this black is, or even if it were white, whatever the color is, you want it to be super, super thin. I'd rather have 15 coats that are really, really thin that I couldn't hardly get to cover. But then finally, those last 5 to 7 coats started covering a little bit. So, and that's basically the whole operation here. I don't like the idea of coming in with real heavy, base coats and loading that baby up. Even if it was like a black lacquer, I don't want it to. I don't want to have much lacquer surface on it than what is necessary, because it really starts robbing the tone of the guitar. Okay, so I have no idea what it looks like on camera, but I'll try to slow down. But in person, and the great thing about the weather, it's been extremely low humidity. It's been real sunny, uh, but it's been perfect weather. Not that I'm spraying it outside, but because I have a spray booth in my basement shop here. But what's going on outside definitely affects what's going on inside as well. And if you do have any sort of moisture in the air, or like hot, humid days, make sure you turn the air conditioner on and keep it really cold, and keep that moisture under control. Because the last thing you want to get is a mean blushing with black. Uh, that turns into a bit of a nightmare, because you have to wash it in warm soapy water and use like a, I don't know, like a Brillo pad, and what do you call that stuff that you clean toilets with? What's that? Uh, Comet. Yeah, like the Ajax or Comet. You have to wash it with that to get the amine blush out, and it is a pain in the ass. It can be done, but it's not something you want to have to fight or have to deal with. Okay. A lot of conversation, or basically just a lot of information in this video. I'm not really going to do any work at all. But I also wanted to show James the guitar because he hasn't seen any of the pictures or anything other than just the rough build pictures. So there you have it. Beautiful guitar. It's very, very, very cool. Very happy with it. And the neck profile, I'll talk about that a little bit. I had mentioned in the last video, I was right at, what was I, 26 millimeter at the 11th fret. And I was exactly 20, let's see if that's in the camera. Barely. I was exactly 22 millimeter at the first fret, and that's exactly what it is right now. I didn't really do anything there. And it was just a little bit over 26 millimeter at the 11th fret. Now I'm about 25 and a half, because as I was blending and rolling, as I was doing my jazz profile, I was rolling in, but I was blending the lower into the fretboard, but I was also rolling it in, just one or two shots where, let me get the tool, where when I had the sandpaper on it, make sure it's clean. I don't want to risk scratching it, but as I was blending in, I let it roll. You just let it roll just a little, and I shouldn't have rolled all the way over like that. Don't do that. Let it roll about probably about 80 degrees, but not flat. You want it to be a real sweet transition as you carry it over. And I had already filed and cleaned all of the frets level with the surface using the file, and I had even already beveled the frets. You got to do that before you try to start rolling this in, because if you've got fretwork hanging out, it's going to tear up your sandpaper. If that makes sense, do your frets, install your frets. These are actually glued in with the CA glue, the thin CA glue. And then everything's leveled, and they're not polished yet, but they're beveled, they're shaped, and they're fit, and I've got the true perfect fretboard surface. Then you're blending the lower mahogany into that rosewood side, or if you had have done binding, you're rolling into that binding and stuff like that. Okay. So it's just I couldn't even show you. It's something I can only talk about and let you know. You just got to get in the shop, get behind the tool, and build your own guitar. And hopefully, you won't screw it up or anything, but just make certain that you do those operations, in that order, and you should be in really good shape. You might see a little bit of grain right there in the mahogany, but that's actually a good sign, because that lets you know that you've only sprayed enough black in order to turn it black. What's about to happen is it will receive about 4 to 5, maybe 7 coats, really thin, of the clear nitrocellulose lacquer. And then, oh wow, this is really important. When you spray your first coat, let it dry about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then go ahead, not with a 220, probably with like a 300 or a 400 grit, and just kind of white sand it. Just kind of kiss it. Don't start sanding at all, but just enough to kind of knock off any burrs or anything. But as I was spraying the black, every 2 or 3 coats, I would take the 220 and actually sand off like 40% of what I had just sprayed, because I was just building a base coat in order for it to be nice and flat. Okay, that ought to make sense, especially if you guys that have done paint work before. So anyway, it is what. Let me check the time. 13, 14 minutes. This is definitely going to be a fairly short video, because there's really not a lot to talk about. Everything's taped up, so I can't really talk about the fretboard and how nice it looks, but it looks very, very, very nice. But once the tape comes off, and then I start blending everything in and oiling it, I have not done the oil work on the fretboard yet. So that will pretty much be one of the last things that I do after I polish the frets. So hopefully that'll be a little bit of a motivation for you to build a guitar. Electric Herald is where these the plans were, and they're free. You can go to electricherald.com, I guess is what it is. It may be .org, I don't know. But just download your templates. And this isn't, like I said, this is an authentic 58 Explorer profile. However, I originally designed every bit of this to be a 25.5-inch scale. So when I did that, I had to, change everything, especially once you go with the Floyd Rose. But the cool thing is once this Floyd Rose goes up here, I don't know if I've got the chrome one, but once the Floyd Rose goes up here, this is just a spare that I've got. You'll see that it'll still have the rock and roll look to it, but it'll, once you go above the Floyd Rose, it'll be per 58 specs. Be really cool. Okay. So on that note, I guess there really isn't much else to talk about, and there's no sense in me just sitting here filling space. So I'll check the table and see if there's anything I might want to talk about. I'll do a brief amount of sanding, just like on a corner or something. That's what I'll do the back, and I'll kind of show you my thought process as I'm getting ready to clear coat my guitar. Let's see if that's in the camera. That should be in the camera. So what do we got here? 220 aluminum oxide. Keep it very small. If you cut that off the width of the paper, fold it into thirds, then you're able to hold it under your fingers and really control it and make certain that you don't get out of control. So basically, as Robert Benedetto used to say, you're not sanding wood anymore, you're only sanding lacquer. So swirls are fine. And the great thing about working with the lacquer is as soon as I open up my can of lacquer and set up my spraying equipment, whether it's my gun or I'm using a little Preval sprayer or something from my big box hardware store, or either I'm spraying it right out of the Stuart McDonald cans. And I got that can from a Woodcraft in Birmingham. But as soon as you spray the lacquer, it immediately just melts into the surface that it is applying to. It doesn't really lay atop it. And that's what I love about the lacquer. Even if you have a little bit of an orange peel, well, it'll melt into that orange peel. I'm not going to say it will flatten it out, because it won't flatten it out, but it'll melt into the base coat that is up under it if you're needing to build coats. Because at this point, the last thing you want to do is try to sand this off real perfectly flat, especially up in there, because as I said at the beginning of the video, you'll run the risk of exposing raw wood. And here's the secret. Let's go ahead and do this top just a little bit. Let me just do the job and pay attention to what I'm doing, because I'm trying to make certain that I don't let it go over the edge. And I'm not letting this backside make contact back here. I'm only letting it make contact about 50 to 60% over, maybe 60 to 70% over. And sometimes at this point, you can just do a 1 or 2 wipes, and that's enough, because you're just knocking off any potential, little fur balls or little fuzz or whatever. You do not want to start trying to sand any corners at all. Again, and like this right here, all I'm going to do is just kind of kiss that a little bit. Robert Benedetto used to always call it, you're just kind of wipe sanding. You're just kind of wiping it once or twice and then get away from it. Leave it alone. That's enough, because you're about to come back with this. Here's where you're going to work your magic with your steel wool. And don't, just because the steel wool is very forgiving, don't stay in that location and continue to work it, because you will also burn it off with the steel wool. The steel wool, it only needs to be used just to blend the corners to the flats. And then there's nothing wrong with going across the flat once or twice more. And also, if there's a little bit of a hiccup, like maybe something got in the paint, you'll feel it. You'll feel it through the steel wool even. So I'm going to slow down because I don't want to get too aggressive. But there's nothing wrong with doing the whole hill just with steel wool, because there are so many little areas that you could screw up with the 220 especially. And just is what it is. So let me get back to the back like I was initially. Again, I'm holding that up back there. in case I forget, that's the black tint mix off. I'm going to put it right there so I have to look down and see it because I want to talk about that in a little while. Mixing that with your lacquer, which is clear. Be real careful right here. I hope that's in the camera. Just do that. I'm just working that area right there. That's okay, let it lay flat now because you're in a fairly large area. But then at this point, go ahead and take your thumb and lift up that back so you don't run the risk of making too much contact back here. This is hell doing this on camera and not messing it up. I hope that's in the camera. And as soon as you see it dull out, get away from it. That's enough, because all you want is to knock off any potential orange peel mountain caps so that your clear then has something to begin to build upon. And it may look like I'm letting that run over, but I'm not. I'm holding up the back so it doesn't make contact on that outside. By now you've got 7 to 10 coats of color at a minimum, and you've been sanding in between every second or third coat. Typically every third or fourth coat is fine. You wouldn't want to just start spraying color and never stopping and sanding, because you'll end up with way too much orange peel. So let's see what we've got here. Several different ways to go about dusting this. I don't really care for the vacuum. You can vacuum it if you want, but I just like a nice soft brush just to kind of knock it off, and then hit it with a, you could use a tack cloth if you want, but I think it's kind of unnecessary at this point. I don't really start using my tack cloth until I'm doing my final 2 or 3 coats. All I'm doing right now is checking to see once this thing gets polished up, what is it going to show? And I don't know if you read between the lines, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm really not one for real shiny guitars, but the client, he does. He likes them. He likes them real shiny. So I'm going to do the best I can to make it a real super slick, shiny guitar. So I'm in uncharted territories here. I typically just build like player guitars. They're kind of not rough, but they're just, my theory is once it's black, okay, that's close enough, man, let's go play it. But it's gonna look good. So you can see how quickly it just leveled off. And at this point, you're gonna have to really refrain from sanding too much. So maybe at this point, get your steel wool out. Now I'm not letting that ride over the corner too much, but I'm kind of letting it slip off the corner. Does that make sense? In other words, I'm sanding with a little bit of pressure out here in the flat, because I know I'm not going to come through out there. But then once I get to that area, I just kind of let it fall off a little bit. And once I see it dull out, get away from it. That's enough, because you want the clear to start building clear coats over the actual black. Okay, I've already done that a little bit, but it's going to be okay to hit it just a little bit more. And just be careful about getting too overzealous. 2 or 3 hits, and then just move on. And then if you see that there's a little bit of orange peel there, which I see there is, then you can come back and determine how much you want to sand out of it. Again, with the 220, you're just knocking off the mountaintops. And then get away from it. Okay, so steel wool from your local like Harbor Freight or big box hardware store. Keep your table real nice and clean. I like using this white cardboard construction paper, because I can do exactly what I just did, pull it off and shake it off real clean. And I do like to, let me brush this off. I do like to keep that little wildcat piece of fur there, just in the event there's just the smallest little bit of something on there that it didn't start scratching it or indenting it. Because at this point, you got to start really being careful. Not that you can't make repairs, because you'd be surprised what type of repairs you could make even after the guitar is finished. And let's talk about that. Let's say you put a nasty little divot in it somewhere. The way you would go about repairing it would be, you've got your black lacquer in the bottom of your jar there. Take your bamboo skewer, or let's say you had a little crater, and it was in an area that's just driving you crazy. Well, you dip your bamboo skewer down into your lacquer, and then you just go right atop the little divot. But let it dry overnight. Don't try to rush that, because you want that little drop that you put in there to melt into the material below it, and then come in, and you got to be really careful at this point, but then just kind of take off the top. And I only want to give you enough information about that so that the wheels can turn a little bit. That's not as easy to do as it is to talk about it. So just be real careful, because typically what will happen is when you start making the repair, you have a tendency to over sand the perimeter, and then it ends up being worse than it was if you had just left the divot. Okay, not being negative, but even I get myself in trouble doing that type of stuff. So I'll probably just end the video right there. But I will talk about I think I've already talked about the lacquer enough to, yeah, I've already given you the number, but if you're buying it in the gallon, it might be the Brilliant Clear. It'll be an M610 1407, and I just ran out last week with that. But if you go with the clear, then you can use your mix-all, whether it's black or white or red, or you can tint it with your trans tints, like your brown mahogany or honey amber and stuff like that, vintage ambers, and do your really beautiful, like your amber looking vintage guitars. So anyway, check it out. Yeah, 27 minutes. That ought to be a fairly good video, because all we talked about was just paint work and stuff like that. There's nothing else really to talk about other than just hopefully this will give you some motivation to get in the shop and paint your guitar, and get ready to start playing it, because it's going to come together very quickly after this, especially since you've got all your fret work done, because you definitely would have wanted to have finished your fret work up to the point where you were about to do the all the actually the polish work, because those are already leveled and even shaped. They haven't been sanded with like a 400 grit, and then I go up to 800 grit, and then I actually do all the final work with steel wool and get everything ready for polishing, and then I do my Dremel, use my little Dremel polish tool to make them mirror. They are a mirror shine, and they're so slippery, it's just unbelievable. And it's far superior than a pleck job. So because a pleck job just levels everything and gets everything real precise, but a pleck job doesn't do anything that an exceptional luthier can do. If you have a flat surface and the frets are consistent, as I mentioned earlier, and they're installed properly, and then they're leveled properly, this right here is the difference between a phenomenal playing guitar or a guitar that's just okay. So it always, as I've mentioned before in the past, you're always crossing the finish line with sandpaper or some sort of abrasive. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And otherwise, I'll end on that note. If you got any questions or comments, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video, and probably won't do another video until the guitar's pretty close to being finished. I might do it. Yeah, I probably will do a video when I'm installing the potentiometers and the wiring harness and all that jazz, but there probably will only be 2 more videos related to this guitar. So I appreciate you guys for checking in. I'll see you in the next video.